In the previous video, I forgot to name the service connection. So here I've done that. I've named it with this variable name Twitter. And then let me just show some examples of using the Wolfram documentation for this Twitter service connection of some things you can do. So here I'm almost at the very bottom of this documentation, and I want to show an example of searching for tweets with a specific hashtag. So let me copy this. It's the very last one on the documentation. And let me paste it. And so if you pasted it in and you hadn't used the same variable name as me, it wouldn't work. So this Twitter is supposed to be the same thing as this service connection here. And then I say, what do I want to do? I want to do a tweet search. And then what do I want to search for? Well, I don't know what Falcon Heavy is, so let me replace that with something else. How about mathematics? And this max items 25, that's saying get at most 25 of these. And let me save this. Let me call it tweets. And do you recognize what kind of object this is? So let's check. Head of tweets. Yeah, it's a data set. And what's the length of this data set? So how many rows are in it? Okay, 25 rows. And what are the keys of this data set? And remember that it's often better to do what are the keys of some specific row. So what are the keys of the first row? And that's going to be the same as the keys of the last row, the 25th row. And what does this stuff mean? So here it's a data set. If I wanted, I could turn it into a list by using normal. And so I could do something like tweets bracket 1. So in the first tweet that was returned, get me the ID. So what is this? Well, this is a number that represents that Twitter or that tweet inside of Twitter. So for example, if I copy this number and then I say, okay, let's go back to our service connection, Twitter, and then let's say get tweet, tweet ID. Okay, and I found this stuff by looking at the documentation, that same page I was on before. Okay, and let's call this, how about tweet 1. So here, again, this is a data set, and it has a little different information from before. So for example, back when it was inside this list of 25 tweets, it didn't have a user ID in it, okay, or a username in it, but here it does. And so as an example, let's get the text out of all of these tweets. So let's try to do it for just one tweet first. So if I do tweet 1 and then text, okay, that works well. And now let's try to do it for all of the tweets from our original data set. So how can we do that? Well, let's do a second type of iterator. And let's say t bracket text, okay, or I take it back. Let's do tweets bracket I bracket text for I from 1 to the length of tweets. Okay, I think this is going to work. And let me call this text. Yep, that looks good. Let me suppress the output. So what type of thing is this? Well, we made it using table, so it should be a list. And like for one last example, let's try to get the pictures, hey, if there are pictures from each of these tweets. So how can I do that? Let me try Twitter and get tweet and tweet ID And let me test this out just with one specific one first. So let's just do the first row in our data set. So tweets1 bracket ID. And then again, I found this phrase using the documentation. Get me the images for this tweet. Okay, there might not be any. And let's see if this works. Okay, yeah, that seems to have worked. And so now let's try to do that for every element inside our data set. So let's do table, and then let's replace this 1 with an I, and let's say for I from 1 up to 25, up to the length of this data set, okay, up to the number of rows in this data set. And let me suppress the output. And it might take some time because it's downloading these images off of the internet. Okay, I don't think these images were included back in our original data set. And you can see some nice things like this looks like it's showing up this creation date for the tweet. When was the tweet made? That looks like it's showing up as a date object in Mathematica. Okay, this is finished importing. And so let's look at it. And so you can see that some of these are empty, but some of them are not. Yeah, so that was just a brief introduction to some of the things you can do in Twitter using Mathematica. And my recommendation is don't come up with something you want to do and then hope it's possible in Mathematica. Instead, it would be better to go to this documentation and see examples of things that can be done, and then try to figure out which of those examples are you interested in.